The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the person or persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the Madison Church of Christ.
Good evening.
Good evening, Larry.
I'm Larry Souder, and welcome to Stories of Amazing Grace. We're coming to you from Mixter Chapel at the Madison Church of Christ in Madison, Tennessee. Thank you for all being with us tonight and for joining us on YouTube. And by way of YouTube, we'd like to have 100 subscribers to YouTube. So in that regard, there are some little calendars back here to bribe you to sign up as a subscriber to YouTube. So pick one of these on your way out, put it on your refrigerator, put it on your forehead, wherever you like. But it says www.storiesamazinggrace.com, and this will take you, if you click on a video, to the YouTube website. And once you get there, subscribe. That just places us up a little bit higher in the rankings when you do that, so we would appreciate that if you would. And if you'd like to get one, those who are viewing this on the internet, write me. Larry@SouderProductions.com, address right underneath me here. You can see it on the screen, and I'll be glad to send you one as well. Today is the 75th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. Many brave men and women died in that war so that we can have our freedoms here in this country today and worship here tonight. This year is also the 25th anniversary of Desert Storm. And tonight we have a decorated combat veteran with us, an A-10 pilot, a former A-10 pilot, a two-star major general by the name of Paul Johnson. Before we get to him and before we get to the video, we want to share with you our theme scripture that we share each Stories of Amazing Grace, Romans 8:38 through 39. I think it applies in his case especially tonight. I'm sure that nothing can separate us from God's love, not life or death, not angels or spirits, not the present or the future, not powers above or powers below. Nothing in all creation can separate us from God's love for us in Christ Jesus our Lord. Before we meet Mr. Johnson, let's take a look at this video.
His father was a preacher, his mother was a medical missionary, and their son was expected to become a farmer. But Paul Johnson ended up being one of the heroes of the Gulf War. His decision to join the Air Force and fly baffled his two brothers and sister, especially since he had never been in a plane before. His brother David Johnson said, "None of us could figure it. He loved tractors and combines. I guess the ultimate machinery would be an airplane." That airplane turned out to be an A-10 Warthog jet. The year was 1991. Scud missiles were falling on Israel and Saudi Arabia, and Captain Johnson was assigned to help take out the Scud missile launchers.
Listen, guy, I got to have a talk with my travel agent. This is not what I had arranged.
It was an unusual mission, but for an A-10 guy, it was really kind of neat because I knew exactly where the target was. I even had some photographs of that target. They told me exactly what to shoot. I was able to pre-plan the mission and actually decide how I was going to execute that mission before I ever walked out the door.
Before the war, the A-10 was destined for the scrap heap. The plane does not carry a sophisticated navigation system. Instead, pilots fly with a map on their laps and navigate according to the terrain below. Intelligence photos are rare to non-existent.
I know one particular guy that was sitting in what we call hot pit, or the ICT, the Integrated Combat Turn, getting the bombs loaded up. And the intel officer climbs up a ladder, shows him a huge scale map, a 1 to 2 million map, a little red dot on it, and says, "See that?" Says, "Yeah." He says, "That's where you're going." Okay.
The Warthog is, however, equipped with a 30-millimeter Gatling gun known as the Tank Killer. During the course of the operation, Johnson was reassigned to help direct the rescue of a Navy pilot who had been shot down in Iraq by a surface-to-air missile. Spending nearly 9 hours in the air and refueling 4 times, the pilot was finally located and brought to safety. Moments before the Navy flyer was picked up, Captain Johnson used his Gatling gun to take out an Iraqi military truck, closing to within 200 yards of the rescue site.
We did the first combat rescue in a hog today. We grabbed an F-14 front seater, Slate 4.6. Went down last night. I don't know how deep we went, I'll have to look. But we grabbed him with a couple of Pablo helicopters and brought him out.
The rescue mission earned Johnson the Air Force Cross, one of 2 awarded in the conflict. Days later after the rescue, Johnson himself wound up on the wrong end of a surface-to-air missile.
I'd been there too long. The weather was interfering. It was past time to throw in the towel and go home. But my fangs had come out. I'd driven my fangs through the floorboard, grown one eyebrow and said, I'm going to go kill this thing. And I decide my last feeble attempt, I'm going to roll down the chute, take it down a load of Mark 82 500-pounders, pull off, and then we'll go home. And a couple of things happen on the attack. As I roll in on the bomb run, Witt, my number 2 man, calls blind. In other words, he can't see me. He's lost sight of me. And I missed that radio call. Had I heard that radio call, the answer would have been, I'm aborting the attack, I come off dry, because I am going down into the threat envelope and nobody's looking at me. Suddenly, what feels like a sledgehammer just hammers my wing, and the airplane hard rolls to the right.
One's hit! One's hit!
I'm yelling in the intercom that one's hit, one's hit. Then I finally key the mic and decide to tell everybody else.
One's hit! One's hit! One's hit!
I look out my wing and see a gaping hole, a lot of skin ripped off the top of the wing. I can see my entire main tire is visible to me, which is a bad thing. I usually don't need to see that.
Does anyone need assistance? You bet I do. What do you need? I'm westbound. I need a vector the shortest way across the
Witt,
border.
who still has not found me, comes screaming down below the weather to get sight of me.
Hey, 1, I'm 2, I'm right above you now, I got you.
Copy that. Keep cover on the ground threats. We'll have to penetrate some bad airspace.
In the Air Force, in emergency situations, we talk about the pucker factor. And 664 in the fleet, she still bears the scars and the fang marks all over the cockpit, but the seat cushion has yet to be found because my pucker factor was so high that particular day. The next day, a lot of guys were coming up to me in a hooch or in a squad and said, PJ, did you sleep okay last night? PJ, were you laying awake last night? And on reflection, I got to thinking about it. I said, no, actually, I slept quite well, thank you. I said my prayer, one at the end of the day, and thank the Lord for taking care of me, and recognize that we revalidated an old concept and an old term from years and years ago when the 8th Air Force and the bombers and the fighters used to talk about coming home on a wing and a prayer. And I think that was applicable in my case. We brought her home on a wing and a prayer.
Ladies and gentlemen, General Paul Johnson. Thank you for being with us. This is some information you sent me this past week. The path in front of us is unknowable. We don't know what our future holds or how our life will unfold. Yet we wake every day and walk along that path making a variety of choices without clarity on what will come next. In a spiritual context, we don't know what road God has for us, even though we may specifically ask for His guidance. Often we have no better idea what to do than take Yogi Bear's advice. If you come to a fork in the road, take it. Paul Johnson's path to this point was unforeseen by everyone. Like many others, he frequently wondered whether his role was one God wanted him performing. Paul, a decorated combat veteran of the United States Air Force, recently retired from a 31-year career, having achieved the rank of Major General. Welcome.
Thank you.
I had to look what Major General meant on the web. I was not in the military. I regret that sometimes.
Okay, that's all right.
Major General is a 2-star general officer rank of the United States Air Force. It ranks just above Brigadier General and below Lieutenant General. During peacetime, it is the highest permanent rank. Is that right?
Correct.
Well,
yes.
That's pretty impressive.
As you said, not anybody saw this coming.
Yes.
Now, full disclosure and confession is good for everyone. I don't follow instructions very well. Larry was really disappointed when I didn't wear my bling today. He really thought I'd be here in my uniform and all of that. And again, Tricia acknowledges I don't follow instructions very well. After 31 years of not being able to pick out my wardrobe, you know, I kind of put on, I think I'll wear the green flight suit today or the blue uniform today. I've kind of enjoyed picking out my own wardrobe. And so I didn't wear the uniform, and I apologize for that.
That's right. Well, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Jump to number 21 photograph of the ribbons and
already throwing him a curve.
We can wait, Will.
There
There it is. This is what some of the ribbons you have on your dress uniform.
I think that's current.
I don't know what it all means. It looked very impressive.
I think that's what I ended with.
Have you seen one of these before?
No, that looks Russian or Soviet.
I picked that up from a street vendor in Bucharest years ago. It looked impressive, though, doesn't it?
It does. It
Yeah.
looks very good.
I thought I'd get more of a laugh also. Let's talk about some background and some highlights of your
Okay.
life. You, when I met you, I was dating your sister.
Yeah, everybody does know that.
This is the younger brother,
Larry is my brother-in-law.
the younger brother of the
And
family.
my big sister is in the audience.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you were ring bearer at our wedding too, I believe. When I
That's
met
right.
you were 9 or 10 years old, and I was impressed that you were reading the World Book all the way through.
With that world, I don't know. I think Mom and Dad bought the World Book maybe when David was young, or I was maybe just born, and we gave away that World Book set even after Tricia and I got married. I kept it even after we got married. I don't know. I just spent hours and hours reading
Pretty
the World
smart guy. Now, I'm going
A lot of time
to
on my
bring you
hands.
down a little bit here, then we'll puff you back up, because when Martell talks about you, she always brings up, I used to change his diapers. So, just want to
Yeah, please do.
point that out.
If she had an opportunity, she'd tell
She's,
everybody that.
I guess, 10 or 11 years older.
Something like
than you
that.
are.
But she is my big sister, and I'm forever glad she's my big
Well,
sister.
let's go some of these pictures. You got your cheat sheet with you?
Yes, I do.
You got a list of those as well. You might do a better
Yeah,
job
we
explaining
can roll
these.
through. Yeah, yeah.
Who
There's
is
nothing
this?
to say.
That's you, age, whatever.
I don't know what old that. You can kind of start stepping through, and I may drop anchor. There's Martell and myself. So yeah, there's big sister, and always my big sister. There's Tricia, my bride of well over 30 years. We didn't stop to count. 37. Yeah, she doesn't know. She didn't know either. 37, 38 years, and that's our wedding day. And there we go. Let's hold there for a second. A lot of people know. Just to clarify, an A-10 is called the Warthog. The official name is the Thunderbolt II, but everybody called the A-10 the Warthog because it had warts all over it. So the joke that everybody in the squadron always told about me was that I went from raising hogs to flying hogs. I thought I wanted to be a farmer. Graduated with a degree in agriculture. Worked on farms, and things weren't going well. It just wasn't working. We were just in a tough stretch of road. Life was not going the way I thought it was supposed to go. The road that I had mapped out was not the road that was working. And we were in Somerville, Tennessee. And if you step to the next slide, this man, Elliot Lambert, on the right. This slide's from about 6 years ago. I was pinning on my first star. Elliot Lambert, back in about 1983 or 84, was a retired Air Force, living there in Somerville, Tennessee. And Elliot saw me just kind of floundering. And Elliot took me under his wing and gave me some advice and gave me some encouragement, broached the idea of applying to the Air Force, which was never in my sight, never part of my dreams. I was not one of these kids that grew up wanting to be a fighter pilot. That just wasn't me. But Elliot really encouraged me to give this a shot and told me how to go about it, gave me some tips on how to go about it. Took us down to an Air Force base to show us around. And
you never flown before?
I never. He said, no big deal, no big deal. And in fact, it's really not. If you bring in a lot of flight experience to the Air Force, they think they got to break some bad habits to teach you their way. So that really wasn't an issue. And timing is everything. I was near the end of the Reagan buildup, the Reagan boom year, so they were taking a lot of people in. And I was selected to go to officer training school and actually go to pilot training. And if not for that man, Elliot, none of this would have happened. Elliot was at my retirement, and I told Elliot in front of everybody, It was about a crowd about like this, that if not for Elliot, if not for his wisdom, his education, his patience, none of those people in that room, except for the family, what I have met, what I have known, all of the places I've been, all the experiences, none of that would have happened except for Elliot. So if there's a great story in this, and there is a great story, is that God from time to time puts people in front of us. God puts people into our lives. And let us all pray that we have the wisdom to pay attention to them, to let them into our lives. If they want to give us a helping hand, let them give us a helping hand, and learn what they have to give us. Elliot still lives in Somerville, looks just like that, and if not for Elliot, none of this happens. So I'm grateful to him so much.
Wow.
Now, if you step to the next one, it's really, really important that Trish be willing to take this step with me, because the Air Force was certainly not in our conversation when I proposed to her. She thought she was marrying a farmer. That was tough enough. And now I proceed to go down this Air Force path and not knowing where that's going to go. And so I tell people that we came into the Air Force as a family, and we left the Air Force as a family. And all too often, that doesn't happen in the military today. It's hard. It's hard on families, hard on spouses, hard on kids. And Trish has taken every step of that journey with me. So I'm grateful for her.
Did the farming
grace.
play a part in
I'm
helping
sorry?
you? Did the farming help you, the degree you had in agronomy in the
No.
Air Force? No? No?
Okay, I'll give you this. As you heard in the video, my brother David, I loved equipment. I loved driving tractors. I loved driving combines. It was all of that. And I really love combines. And if you've ever driven a combine, you'll learn to listen to a combine. You'll learn to listen to strange noises. It's just a lot of clattering going on, and you learn what makes sense and what's new and what's different and what doesn't make sense. You do the same thing in an airplane. You listen for noises you haven't heard before, and found out that, maybe an airplane's the ultimate combine. And maybe that's why they gave me an A-10. I describe the airplanes this way. The T-38, which was a trainer in the Air Force, great airplane. When you think of a T-38, think of a Porsche 911, just a really cool airplane. If you look at an F-15 or an F-22 or an F-15E or something like that, you think about Formula One racer. When you look at an A-10, you think John Deere. And it was just a natural fit for me.
Wow. We have Kim, we have a mystery voice that we could play here, I think.
Morning devotions from Monday, June the 24th. Good morning. I'm thankful to God for His providence, that we've been guided through another night, and that we have you listening in our audience today.
Who is that?
It's Dad.
He died in 1984. You had just entered the service, but he did not live long enough to see the great accomplishments that you had all those years later, rescuing a downed Navy pilot.
That's why you told me the Kleenex were up here.
Bringing a shot-up plane back home. Amazing.
It is.
He would have been so proud, and I know that's a great disappointment for you, for him not to see that.
We want to know, goodness, you did it to me. Man. We all want to know what's going to happen to us. We all want to know how it's going to unfold. But we rarely get burning bush moments. And if you remember Moses, he didn't like his burning bush moment. I mean, there's 2 chapters there where Moses argues with God and tries to weasel out of it, and he's getting the burning bush moment. And we often think, God, just tell me what you want me to do. Well, sometimes if he does, we don't like the answer. And sometimes all we can do is just walk the path, take the next step, listen to the people that God puts in your life, and stay faithful to Him, and let God take care of it. And then also there's the point that sometimes we think that there's some grand plan, and maybe God's got some more important things than to worry about my personal grand plan. So just walk the path and see where the path takes you. It's going to be forks in the road. It's going to be stumbles along the way, and you're never going to know where it winds up. There's going to be twists and turns, and it certainly never wound up where we thought it was going to wind up. and to be certain what happened in Desert Storm, the rescue mission, the battle damage, the Air Force cross, and all of that. It pointed my career in a different direction, and I certainly never envisioned 30 years, never envisioned 20 years, but we wouldn't trade any of it.
You went from being a hog farmer, cattle farmer, working in land, to working in the Pentagon. Amazing.
There may be more similarities there than you know. Let's be careful.
Let's go back to some of these pictures here.
Okay.
Where do we end off?
Yeah, this is right. This is the next one. This is after they've started to take the airplane apart. And that's what when I looked out the canopy, flying in Kuwait, I looked out and that's what I saw, with a little bit of flame coming out of the wing. And I said, that doesn't look good. If you'll step to the next one, that's her sitting on the runway. When I climbed out of her, that's what she actually looked like. The tire is shredded. The wing was barely hanging on. The wing was flapping a little bit as I flew it back, and just wasn't sure the gear was going to come down or that I was going to be able to land it safely. But she was a tough old bird. The reason I wanted to do this is they almost took the airplane and pushed her off in the ditch. They just said, not worth it. Not worth it. They wanted to push her off in the ditch. But we had some engineers from the repair depot says, we'd like to take the time and put a new wing on it. And so what they did, the wing actually attaches in three places. Let's back up one, if you could. The wing attaches in three places. Right above the landing gear is kind of where the wing bolts, and then that section goes through the fuselage, and it does the same thing on the opposite side. They took 30 days. They took a month, and they replaced the wing on the airplane. And the problem was, while they're taking all of this, the wing structure off of the airplane becomes a spare parts bin for everybody else. We had 140 A-10s on the base. And so if anybody needed a UHF radio, they knew where to find one, because she's not flying. Or they needed a new UHF radio antenna. They knew where to find one, because she's not using it. Or they needed an oil pressure gauge. Well, they come to this one because she's not using it. So they get the wing fixed on the airplane, and now she's ready to fly, only she's not ready to fly. You got to go find the radios, the antennas, the oil pressure gauges, all those things that have been scavenged off of her. And the person that did that is called the crew chief. And the crew chief really owns the airplane. This was my airplane. It had my name on it. But the real owner of the airplane is the crew chief. And he spent days, countless days and nights, going around, finding all the parts, putting them back on the airplane. By this time, the war is over. And everybody's getting ready to go back home. I mean, we're packing our bags. And there was uncertainty whether or not she was going to be able to go. There was uncertainty whether or not the airplane was going to be ready to fly home with the rest of the airplanes. And the colonel that was in charge of maintenance was walking through the old hangar one night, and all he could see was the feet of Eric Staniland. He was the crew chief. Eric's feet were sticking up out of the cockpit while he was trying to replace something under the ejection seat, and he just yelled up to him and said, "Eric Staniland, are you ready to go home?" And he says, "Not until my airplane goes home." And it struck me that then and today that we have people that are willing to give themselves to something larger than themselves. They're willing to commit themselves to something larger than them. And I will tell you, you can criticize the young generation all you want to, but I lived with this young generation in Afghanistan. I'll put them up against anybody. And I know a lot about the greatest generation, and I take nothing away from the greatest generation. But I've known EOD troops who defuse bombs who have been on their 7th and 8th deployments. And they'd rather do that than get out. And I've just been so struck with people that can commit themselves to something larger than themselves, and then every now and then I'll think, sometimes I wonder if I wish we could see more of that in us as Christians sometimes. Sometimes wish maybe we could give ourselves to something larger than ourselves, more so than we do. So I guess, as Dad would say, that's my sermon for the day. So the next slide.
That's not about it. That is it.
That's not about it.
That's what he would say.
That's Dad's quote. Yeah. This is the same airplane, 2664. And I flew her back to Myrtle Beach. Flew her all the way back across the Atlantic, flew her back, and that's Tricia. 2 boys, Eric and Chris, and the bundle of white in the middle is Jessica. She was about 4 or 5 months old right then. And they're all married now.
She was born while you were overseas.
She was born, she was born in the fall. I got to see her briefly during Christmas. And they're all grown. Both the boys have kids of their own. We got 6 grandkids. Jessica's married as well, faithful families. So I call that a family portrait. It's not just us, that's the airplane. I tell people there's 2 women in my life, and Trisha's just fine with that. That airplane's been retired. It's out at the boneyard now, out in Arizona, and now they use her for spare parts. And we went to see her about a month ago, visiting friends out in Tucson. Went to see the airplane, and she looks pretty rough. Looks like 57 Chevy on cement blocks. And Tricia cried. Tricia cried when she saw her. She didn't look very good, but that's a family portrait.
All right. Next. This is your family?
Here we are, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. That's our squadron patch hanging from the mailbox. You always identify yourself by the squadron you're in. And there we are. Young group, young folks looking good.
And this next shot here is a little celebrity. You were in a parade in New York, is that right? Now, were you still married here when you were riding with Brooke or not?
Okay, I rode in a ticker tape parade with Brooke Shields.
Big deal.
Now, truth in advertising. This picture, wherever we lived, this picture would hang in a prominent place in our house.
Really?
At Patricia's insistence. She thought it was the funniest thing in the world that I rode in a parade with Brooke Shields. And she told it as a joke to everybody else. I thought it was kind of cool, but she just thought it was downright funny.
Let's quickly go through some of these others here. This looks like you're saying, wow, what is that outside my window?
Bagram, Afghanistan, 2006. I was a group commander. I was in charge of the airfield. I was in charge of all the flying operations on the airfield. And my deputy and I teed up this joke photo that Air Force One just landed at the base, and I have no idea what's going on. Trust me, we knew for 10 days the president was coming. Nobody else knew, but we knew.
And we got a shot of you and President Bush
Before you leave this,
okay.
let me just tell this.
All right.
This has been an exhausting political season. Election season. But I will tell you, sitting in a foreign country, sitting in a combat zone, and watching Air Force One touch down in the middle of a combat zone will take your breath away. There's nothing like seeing that airplane land in some other part of the world. That was a pretty neat experience. I didn't see the president in that particular instance. I was busy trying to keep the airfield running, but that was a fun time. And then the next one, as you said, now I met President Bush when he came to Tucson. He was coming.
You were the base commander here.
I was the installation commander at Davis-Monthan, so he is on my base, getting a chance to shake his hand. He's getting ready to leave. Yeah, this is the day he's getting ready to leave. He landed the night before about 10:30. He didn't look that good. He'd had a long day. He was in a hurry to get to his bed, so he looks pretty fresh right now. He's ready to start the day, fly out.
And the next one?
This was Kandahar, Afghanistan. Spent a year in Kandahar running the wing. And those are a sample of the airplanes. By no means, we had other airplanes as well, big airplanes, and some of the things that we did there at Kandahar. Again, the idea of young people willing to commit themselves to something larger than themselves. This was the easiest leadership challenge in 31 years.
Did we not give young people the opportunity, you think, in America?
No.
The service does that?
I agree. Yes, absolutely. There are people here doing these kinds of jobs that have responsibilities that you would never find in the civilian sector. And they relish it. They love it. Easiest leadership challenge I ever had. I never had to encourage. I never had to drive. I never had to prod. It was always, no, not so fast. Wow. There are times, especially the helicopter you see there, that's a rescue helicopter. Those folks are like Labrador retrievers. You throw the ball and they'll go get it, no matter how long you want to throw the ball. And there were times I'd have to say, no, you're not going on this mission.
We have Representative Gabby Giffords.
Gabrielle Giffords, this was certainly before her incident in the shooting in Tucson. I was gone when that happened. But I got to spend some time with Representative Gifford in her district, and she was out here for a reunion as we had A-10s come home. And the reason I put up the president and Gabrielle Giffords here is It's awfully easy to get cynical about politics, and there's reason to be cynical about politics. I've got time in D.C., and pig farming in the Pentagon, like we said, maybe similar. But I do want to say that there are people who truly want to be public servants. And if you really want to be a public servant, it's a thankless job. As somebody said, if you want a friend in Washington, D.C., buy a dog. But there are people that want to be public servants, and regardless of the politics and all of that, I was impressed with Gabrielle Giffords. I truly was. She took time out of her schedule to come see these airmen come back from a long deployment. There was no photographer. There were no reporters. She had nobody following her at the camera. She just wanted to see families reunited and show her support to them. So I thought she was a pretty special lady.
And you got your first star number 1. This was in Henderson, Tennessee.
I had to invite Martell. You can see Martell. Martell is supervising.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. She's big sister to all of us. I'm the baby, but she's big sister to all of us. So Martell is supervising, and I had to invite her and Steve and David because they just weren't sure this was real. So I had to invite them. They weren't convinced this was really going to happen.
We're going to shout all the siblings here.
And there they are. And I'm the baby of the family.
And the next shot here is with you with the flag. Was this a change of command?
Yeah, this is where I'm taking the flag in Afghanistan. Like I said, I never knew where this was going to go. All I wanted to do is fly an airplane. Then I wanted to go to weapons school. Then I thought maybe I could be a squadron commander. And then after that, I thought, what's next? And so I was kind of along for the ride. And maybe we'll talk about this in a little bit, but there's a lot of things to challenge faith in the military. We all have those kinds of jobs, but a lot of things to challenge faith. But there's also a lot of things to strengthen faith if you pay attention. And over the years, I tried to pay attention. And over time, and it took 30 years to figure this out, I got to work and go to vastly different cultures, vastly different worldviews, depending on where you live and the culture you come from. I got to see people that had held grudges and hatreds for each other for centuries. I got to work with people from other militaries around the world, with the other services, and was able to discover that we can work with each other. We don't always have to agree with each other, but we can work with each other. And I was about to embark on a year right here. Boy, that's this smile and this gleam in my eye. I'm fresh. I'm ready to go. Well, I'm on day 1 of 365 days that are 24/7. It was Groundhog Day. There were no holidays. And I'm all ready to go, but that long, exhausting, enduring was probably one of the most rewarding I'd ever had. Now listen, everybody's worried about me while I'm over here. Well, I knew when I was in danger and when I wasn't in danger. The person who had the hard year was sitting about 10 rows back, right back here, because Trisha's sitting in an empty house. Kids are gone. They're out. They're living their own life. And so it's just the two of us. And so I go off to Afghanistan, and she's in an empty house by herself. So, the war widow, I guess you'd call it. But hard year for her. I was busy, and I was in my element. I was doing what I'd been trained to do. That was a hard year for her. She's not looking for a repeat of that one.
Let's talk to the ladies just for a second here.
You're going to do it, aren't you?
Your sister is real proud of you.
You're going to do it.
You've got page after page of newspaper articles about your heroics and your successes in the military. When we get a comment from Martell about when you first learned of the fame of your brother over in Iraq, and how did you handle that? How did the whole family handle that?
We were living in Madison, and the phone rang. My mother was home from Ghana. She was working as a nurse in Africa, and she was at home with us, and the phone rang, and it was your sister-in-law in Kansas. Larry's brother lives in Kansas, and she said, "Turn on the TV. I just saw Paul on TV." I said, no, there's no way, no. Yes, I promise, it was Paul Johnson. I said, what was it on? CNN, turn on CNN. So we did, and that just started this huge snowball that just kept getting bigger and bigger. And so then what we did was just sort of brag to each other. Well, I was on Channel 5 live. Yeah, but the governor called me. Yeah, but the White House called me. But so we all got into this fame thing not because of anything we'd done.
And I'm oblivious to all of this.
He knows
I have no
nothing.
idea any of this is
Nothing.
going on. And then when I come home, they don't give me credit for any of it.
And Patricia, how did you handle Paul being overseas and being alone and moving it to so many different places around the world and uprooting your children in school, from one school to another? How did you handle that?
You know, when I signed on to marry him, it was, we do things together. And people go, how do you do this? And you just do it. You just go to a new place and you get excited about the new place. And when he's gone, you know, I would try to find people to do things with. And when he said I was all by myself, when he did the year in Afghanistan, our daughter was in school in Freed-Hardeman and I went to Henderson. So she was there, but she kind of wasn't there. She was busy with school stuff and all of that. And there were a lot of evenings I was home alone. So that was a tough year for me. But, you know, I wouldn't change any of it. It was an awesome life. We got to do some wonderful things. And I was always very proud of him. And I will tell you, there was one time when things were really bothering me and I was afraid for him. And they talk about falling prostrate on your knees. And I literally went down to the ground and just poured my heart out. And I got up and I felt the most wonderful peace, and I slept well every night. People around me would say, you know, I'm so worried about Paul. His brother specifically told me, you know, he was very afraid and couldn't sleep sometimes. I said, I'm sleeping like a baby. You have to sometimes. You just have to give it to God and go on.
Okay. Family is important, isn't it? Your blood family and your military family.
It is. And Christian family when you move from place to place. I'll get these numbers wrong, and I may get them wrong even looking at them. Tallied up, and if I get it right.
Got a picture of you, Paul, you on the tarmac. I don't know what this means to you, but what it meant to me is, what have I got myself into?
I thought that a lot.
And I'm lonely.
You know,
But
when you're in command, success is every morning when you go in and log onto your computer, you can log onto your computer. That means you haven't been fired. You're always worried you're going to go in to log onto your computer and you're locked out. And that means, okay, something bad's happened. I'm not here anymore. At least 19 different houses, at least 18 different church families, and at least 20 different schools for the kids. And of all of this, and it was lonely for me, lonely for them. Sometimes when you go someplace, the first thing you would find is the church family, wherever we went. Sometimes if you find a congregation, you have found the congregation. And there are times when you cling to one another in your church family. But then there's places where it's a spiritual challenge. It's tough on your kids when they're a teenager and they sit in their youth group as one other teenager. There's two in the youth group. That can be hard on the kids. And so there's your blood family, there is your Christian family, and then there was also the Air Force family. And it very much is a family. And that's the other point that I'll make. If you scroll through, we'll probably come to some of those. I don't know what all we're going to get here. Oh yeah, I'm getting out of an airplane. They're going to hose me down for a Finney flight. Last time in this unit, and Tricia came up the ladder to give me a kiss. That's one of our favorite pictures. And family, hold here for just a second. This is the other family portrait. This is the same airplane. 10 years later, I'm becoming a squadron commander, and the same airplane is there, and now it's my airplane again, 2664. So this is another family portrait. Okay, you can let it go. Randy flew with me on the rescue mission. Great guy, golf ball. The people you fly with become very important to you, and you can just let them run. You're going to see... Tricia has 31 years military service. My kids, depending on their age, have 18 years military service or 20 years military service. Guys I learned to fly the A-10 with. The next one I think is guys I went to weapons school with. These are all folks that can have radically different values than I did. I was preacher. That was my call sign. Everybody knew kind of who I was and what I was about. They knew I was a
How did
teetotal.
that work in the service? You being a moral guy, and maybe some people in the service weren't quite as moral, not saying all are. How did that go?
I was incredibly blessed. It never worked to my disadvantage. I was skeptical walking into my first fighter squadron because, they can be a rowdy bunch. I mean, you're talking about 25 alpha males, and if you're not careful, the place looks like a frat house on a Friday night. It took them about 45 minutes on a Friday night to figure out that PJ didn't drink. And it never worked to my disadvantage. In fact, I got to go on a lot of deployments because they always wanted a designated driver, and they knew PJ would be one. But there were people, they're different worldviews, different philosophical views, very different theological views, if they had any at all, and people that in a different time and place I probably wouldn't have associated with. But we put our lives in each other's hands every day. Whether you're an agnostic or you're an atheist or whatever you are, we trust ourselves with each other's lives implicitly. And again, I guess the story is we really can't get along. We don't have to agree with everything.
We haven't learned that in the church yet, though, have we?
Well, we struggle sometimes. But I will tell you, sometimes where it worked was in a foreign country. You're all away from home. You're all away from mom and dad and your aunts and uncles and cousins. Blood family is on the other side of the ocean. You're a Christian family and it's a small group. And if you're going to be a family, you're going to have to make it work, even when you don't agree with each other about everything. We're still learning that one sometimes in the church.
Yeah, shout out your family again here.
And this is the gang.
Extended family.
All the kids, all the 2 daughters-in-law, son-in-law, all the grandkids. We got 6 of them. Jessica hasn't started yet, and she's given us notice not to be in a hurry. Our kids are all faithful. They married faithful spouses, and they are all creating Christian homes. And I often wonder, and Trish and I talk about this, we wonder, did the military experience, are they faithful in spite of all of the places we drug them to, or maybe they're faithful because of all the places we drug them to? I don't know. But it was hard on them at times.
Tell me about the coins.
Yeah. Let me brief the idea of the challenge coins in the military, if I could. There's 2 ideas in the challenge coin. The first is, let me get my pockets here. There's 2 kinds of coins. One is a commander's coin, and that is, that's the one I pulled out. This is the coin I carried when I was a squadron commander, and they were the Tiger Sharks, and I was Shark 1. And so this is the Shark 1 coin. And so the commander walks around the installation going about his daily business, and he usually got 2 or 3 in his pocket. And if he sees anyone that's doing remarkable work, that's just a cut above, great attitude, doing really hard work, and it's noteworthy, he'll just take it, and you have to learn the technique to do this right, that you actually can shake hands and palm the coin to them when you do this. You got to figure it out or you'll drop it, and that's bad juju. And you have been coined by the commander. That's a commander's coin. And everybody wants to be coined by the commander. So that's one version of that. There's another version of the coin, and that is, this is also from the same fighter squadron, 75th Fighter Squadron, Tiger Sharks. It's a different coin. This is a coin that's given to anyone who has become a mission-ready pilot in that squadron. You don't get it from the squadron commander because you've done really cool stuff. You get it from the commander because you're a member of the unit. You've earned it because you're a member of the unit. There's, I don't know how many coins I got, but there's about 4 that matter. The very first one I had like this because I was a member of the squadron. The 2 commander coins that I gave out as a squadron and a wing commander, and then this one. As I retired, I was trying to think of something to give the kids. And I'm not a very creative guy, but this came to me in a blinding flash, and I'm pretty proud of this idea. And Tricia helped me shape it a little bit. And this is the family coin. On the front side, true blue Air Force family, the 2 stars, they're all numbered. The A-10, and then 31 years is how long we did this. You flip it over, and it's the Johnsons in the middle. And what you have to see is the silver, the 7 circles kind of in the middle, that's the A-10 Gatling gun. Sorry, the A-10 had to get in this. And that's what let's stare at the front of an A-10, and that's what that looks like. And then around are the names. Me, Tricia, Chris, Eric, Jessica, and the airplane.
Very symbolic.
And I had to make the point is, that's not a commander's coin. That's not a coin that's been handed out because you've done some really cool stuff. It's a coin because you're a member of the unit. You're a member of the family. And so the family got the first ones. I got one, Tricia got two, Chris number 3. This is number 4. You can see here on the left, so that's Eric. 2664, when we were out in Tucson, I taped a coin to her when I was out there. And then coins for the grandkids and everybody else. And the other person that got a coin was Elliot Lambert, the fellow you saw in the picture earlier. Because that Elliot.
Who started the whole thing.
Who started the whole thing.
Wow. Impressive. I wonder if the audience has any questions for Paul that only a general could ask. I know I got some unusual type things. Let me start. Stupid questions only a general could answer.
I usually just say that's the stupidest question I ever
know.
heard. Anyway.
Well, let's talk about the Pentagon.
Right.
What if we walk in the Pentagon? What do we see? What are some secret rooms in there that civilians don't have access to that you have seen? Tell us about it.
Well, if I tell you, I'll have to kill you.
Yeah.
The first thing to remember is the Pentagon is a gigantic office building. 25,000 people work there every day. Or as a good friend of mine says, in his accounting office, I asked him how many people work in his accounting office, and he said, about half of them. 25,000 people go to work in the Pentagon. I don't know how many people work there. It's a giant office building. But what is unique about it is most every office is behind a cipher lock door or a pad, and you pull out your building pass and you swipe it before you can go through. So who knows? There's 5 floors above ground, 2 or 3 floors below ground. I have no idea how many offices. I was probably admissible to maybe less than 5% of those offices. Because I had no business in Navy spaces. I would be considered a spy to go into the Navy spaces or the Army spaces. And the other thing is that electronic devices are just taboo. So step one, when I'd walk in the ante room to my suite of offices, step one is every day pull my phone out, turn it off, put it in a lockbox, turn the key, and leave it. Because I can't take it into my space. Your little Fitbits? No, not in the Pentagon. Anything that was wireless, you can't do any of that. So there is a high level of security. But once you get the hang of it, it just kind of becomes second nature to you. But I did get kind of careless about having classified information on my desk because I was behind 1, 2, 3 cipher locked doors before you got to my office. So I just had classified information on my desk every day, and the frightening thing is you get casual about it. And so when Tricia would come to visit me, it's like, I gotta sweep up the place. I gotta start covering things before I let anybody in my office. So the security is pervasive, but after a while, it just becomes another office building. But there are some neat spaces. The place called the Tank, where the Joint Chiefs of Staff have their meetings. It's just an office room. The National Military Command Center is pretty cool because that is where we have connectivity to the far-flung reaches of the Air Force and the military writ large. But there is a really unique place in the Pentagon because it's a hexagon, a pentagon, duh. And in the middle is a large courtyard. I call it the smoking alley, but a large courtyard, big trees, picnic area, and a building right in the middle. And if you go back to the Cold War, the Russians watched the Pentagon, the Soviets watched the Pentagon during the Cold War, and they spent a lot of time with satellite surveillance of the Pentagon, and they saw a lot of traffic in and out of this building just constantly. And the Soviets surmised and assessed that was the entrance to the underground command shelter, the command bunker. And so that became a high priority target for the Soviets. But after the wall came down in 1990, we had to break the news to them that that's just the hot dog stand.
Anybody else have a question? Here we go.
Were there differences under different administrations as far as when you were serving? And if so, what administration did you enjoy serving under the most?
When I was in the field, which is where I spent most of my time, the differences were almost always more perceived than they were real. allow a story. I don't know how many people know a fellow by the name of Robbie Reisner. Robbie Reisner spent 7 years in a POW camp in Hanoi. Spent probably 2 years of that in solitary confinement. He was the Air Force's senior ranking officer in Hanoi. The man's a giant. He's about 5'6", but Robbie Reisner's a giant. Passed away about 2 years ago. I had the privilege of being at a banquet with ex-POWs back in the early 90s. And I'm in awe. And there's several like me, young captains, and we got to kind of play host to these guys. And this is a room full of ex-POWs from the Vietnam era. And we just felt we were in the presence of greatness. And we were. And this was the early days of President Clinton. And the early days of President Clinton were rocky for the military. There was some animosity there. There were the charges of President Clinton being a draft dodger. There was animosity over how they perceived the military, that they didn't want people in uniform around them in the White House and all of this. And the rumor mill was just churning. And again, I think it was more smoke than fire. But we are in the cocktail hour before the banquet starts. And one of the other POWs, big, rough man, comes scurrying up to Brigadier General Reisner, retired, and looks at him and says, "Hey, Robbie, as you start a banquet, you do a lot of toasts. It's so much folderol and tradition and all of that. Most of us don't even understand the traditions. But in one of the toasts, you toast the commander-in-chief. And this guy looks at Robbie and says, "Robbie, a lot of talk going around the room. Are we going to toast the commander-in-chief?" And Robbie, shortest person in the room, standing there in his mess dress, kind of rocks back on his feet and says, "Well, of course we'll toast the commander-in-chief. He's the man that sends us into harm's way. I wish him nothing but the best." That was a big lesson for me. I don't care what my politics are. I don't care who I vote for. I wish the president the best. Okay, he's the one that, with a word, sends us into harm's way. So I don't pray for presidential failure. And really, most of the time, the differences are more perceived than real by the time you get out where the rubber meets the road. Long answer.
You mentioned it before our session tonight at home. Things are a little bit different perception-wise in Washington than it is in Main Street America.
Yeah.
Comment on that just a minute.
Living up in D.C., there's a healthy amount of cynicism in D.C. We got good friends here that retired back here into Tennessee, and they worked up in D.C. for quite a while. And Mike's about as cynical as I am. And there are a lot of good public servants up there, but there's a healthy amount of cynicism in D.C. And we're pretty cynical about just about everybody up there. We're just cynical about politics in general. I wasn't prepared that when I retired and I came back out of D.C. and we retired here to Tennessee in July. I came here in July. And I was struck by the passion that was going on in the election, regardless of your position. I was struck by people's deep, abiding passion for and against the candidates. And there's some of us saying, yeah, they're politicians. It's Washington. I'm not sure how different any of them are. Now, I'm sure they are different, but I will tell you, and I don't agree with this, but I understand how David Lipscomb came to the beliefs that he came to in the 19th century. If you don't know this, David Lipscomb had the position that we don't participate in government as Christians. He didn't even vote. He thought we had no role to play in the government. I don't agree with that. But with 2 tiers in Washington, I can see how he came to that. There's a lot of people trying to do really good work in Washington, but politics is about the art of the possible. And when you're talking about the art of the possible, there's a lot of give and take that goes on. And we're not comfortable with that.
Thank you. We're over time, but I want to play a 2-minute video before we close that you recorded, I'm not sure when, but evidently for...
back in December, getting ready for the 25th anniversary of Desert Storm.
Let's roll
not quite a year ago.
Let's roll that.
I showed up to Desert Storm on New Year's Day, 1991, 16 days before the war started. When I showed up there, I took the weapons shop from Captain Steve Phillips. Sif was the weapons officer before I got there. When I showed up, he became a flight commander, and he turned over the weapons shop to me. Captain Steve Phillips was killed in action in Desert Storm. General Horner had made the comment that he was not disturbed, but a little leery of the fact that with all of the video of the attacks and the things that took place in Desert Storm and the precision strikes, that we had made war a little bit antiseptic. And we need to remember that it's not. It's personal, it's costly, and for us as a squadron, that was our painful moment. We did not all come home from Desert Storm. One of our favorite pictures is me climbing out of the airplane at Myrtle Beach after the war, and I'm hugging Tricia, and the boys are running around me, and there's a bundle of white blankets and so forth. That's our infant daughter Jessica, and you can't see her because she's all wrapped up in the bundle, and now they're all grown and married. So yeah, it was a lifetime ago, but I really hope we can remember how we came together as a joint and a coalition team. Nations from all over the world, all of the services, supporting each other, generating effects for one another to achieve an effect in an incredibly short period of time.
General Johnson, thank you for being with us. Thank you. Thank you. Let's have a brief prayer before we go. Father, we're thankful that you as our God have ordained government. You've ordained the family. And you have used this man in both of those capacities. He has been a leader. You ordained the church. He's been a leader in the church. We're thankful for that. Thankful that you have kept him safe so he could be a great influence on those in the military, and as he got out of the military, has lived a life that reflects you among the civilians, among us Christians, and we're thankful for that. Father, be with those who are now serving in foreign lands. Keep them safe. We're thankful for our freedom. Help us to never take that for granted. We pray through your Son.